Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, Kyrie Irving was going to be a Laker, and now he's not. That's all next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes on weekends, we get this thing up bright and early for you. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little bit early before the audio product posts, especially on days when there's no game like this one.
Well, there were games going on, Brian, just not on the court.
Just not on the court. That's right. So some interesting comments from Malik Monk about, his willingness to take a little bit less money, perhaps, and his comfort level in Los Angeles that we will get to in a few moments. But my God, Andy, Kyrie Irving, boy, did he take the sheep that just their way through the NBA news cycle on quite a roller coaster ride on Monday.
Yeah, as the flat world turns.
I tell you what. So we all woke up to the news that Kyrie Irving had received permission to explore sign and trade deals with anyone around the league that might be interested in this. Remember, Kyrie is facing an option to pick up $36 million, but wanted a long-term deal from the Nets. They seemed unwilling. Kyrie was exploring
after everything he's given that organization over the last 3 years, Brian. Bunch of effing ingrates in Brooklyn, if you ask me.
So ungrateful. So that went on, and then we heard rumors that the Lakers had obviously offered Russell Westbrook because that's the only way they could make this work. The Nets weren't terribly interested,
and apparently, by the way, the Lakers were the only team that was really, to whatever degree they were engaging in, to whatever degree engagement even means in a scenario this both specific and ridiculous. Apparently the Lakers were the only team really engaging in sign and trade talks with general manager Kyrie Irving.
Right. And let me ask you a question. What does that, I have my theory here, and this is not something we discussed in our little pre-show meeting, but what is your theory behind that? What does that say to you that the Lakers were reportedly the only team willing to engage in a sign and trade scenario with the Nets regarding Kyrie?
I mean, my deepest, darkest concern is they were the only team willing to even entertain the idea of giving Kyrie Irving the full Monty in terms of the max years, max money. And by the way, we should make sure it's clear, just setting all this up, Kyrie has opted into that year.
Yes,
it has been,
we were getting there, but now at this point, we should let people know the ending. Spoiler alert.
Well, just with him, so all of this, right. It's important that people understand where all of this is coming from before we go too far down the
by about 4 o'clock in LA.
Yes,
Kyrie had released a statement, which we will get to, which is just cosmically obnoxious, that he is in fact opting into his deal, which means he's fairly locked into Brooklyn, at least for a little while.
Well, if nothing else, he no longer can be signed and traded. Like there's nothing that can be extended to this, anything like that. So he could still be traded, but whatever control Kyrie either had over this process, thought that he had over this process, whatever, that is all gone. Apparently his intention is to play with the Nets, but in any event, he did not opt in with the express intent of being traded, like say Montrezl Harrell did last year with the Lakers. Mm-hmm. He opted into his deal with the hope of being traded, and that's ultimately what happened with him with Washington. So for all intents and purposes, Kyrie is, for the time being, remaining in Brooklyn.
Yeah. I think what it says to me was that the Lakers, I guess, were willing to entertain the idea, like you say, of Westbrook, of Kyrie, obviously, But it also says to me the Lakers are the only team with a $47 million problem of their own that they would like to exchange. And so,
Sure.
That nobody else in the league apparently was like, maybe we should kick the tires on this thing. Tells me everything I need to know about Kyrie kind of around the league, because and the way, importantly, this has been a theme that I think is going to sustain itself through the offseason and into next year and all kinds of things. The way that we're regarding stars, and the gymnastics that teams will go through in order to get one. And Kyrie, from a talent level, is a star. He is one of the elite offensive players in the NBA. 27, 28 points a night, can carry you through games offensively. He is that good. And there was a time at which just his mere availability would have been enough to get a bunch of teams at least making phone calls. Monday, it was just the Lakers because the Lakers had Westbrook. And if they didn't have the Westbrook problem, I doubt they would have been engaged.
Well, certainly not to that level, and maybe not that, I guess, not as willing to at least theoretically go as far as Kyrie wanted. I mean, look, if that was the case, the Lakers didn't just dodge a bullet. They dodged like a hailstorm of bullets, like that took down Sonny Corleone in the toll booth in the first Godfather. I mean, like, this was
missed.
Like, this was Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix, like that sort of thing, in terms of if they really were willing to engage this, like the idea of this is what we need to do to compete, to keep LeBron, whatever, like to, try to get rid of the stink of last season. If they were willing to go into long-term business with that dude, my God, did they dodge a hailstorm of bullets.
And I think we will find, information will start to come out about what the Lakers were willing to do here. I think we'll get different messaging. I think one thing is clear. The Nets didn't want Russell Westbrook. I mean, and that this whole thing wasn't going to work unless the Nets or someone was willing to take on Westbrook, which was always going to be a bit of a tall order. But I mean, maybe I am giving them too much credit. Maybe I am taking their recent run of what appears to be competence in terms of how they went through the Darvin Ham process and how they went through the draft. They bought in, like it's been a good couple months. I feel like if they had gone it and said Westbrook and 2 first rounders, or everything we got, and that indicates to me that they'd be maybe willing to, if you're going to give up the 2 first rounders, you're willing to sign Kyrie long term. Otherwise, you're taking a crazy risk. So I feel like this does indicate the Lakers had limits here.
I hope. I mean,
I hope.
Look,
I hope.
Yeah, it may also have just been a matter of not being able to make a deal work or find a third team that would take on Kyrie, that could have, the requisite salaries to send out, that wouldn't end up bogging down the Lakers with too much salary of their own, or, like a third. Charlotte always keeps getting linked to the Lakers as a potential destination for Russ, but maybe Brooklyn didn't want any of the pieces from Charlotte, especially if they thought those pieces would lead to Durant wanting to leave. And it's interesting too, like, the supposed leverage that Kyrie truly had in his back pocket, at least the way this is being reported out. And I don't think, created out of thin air, but the idea that if he left, Durant would leave. And I'm sure there was some element of truth to that, but, we've talked a little bit about this before, but I heard Amin El-Hassan talk about this on Dan Le Batard's show, and I thought he phrased it very well. And I'm paraphrasing the way he said it, but I think not too much. Kevin Durant may very well, and likely was, waiting this thing out to determine whether or not he would leave if Kyrie was gone. But he likely was also waiting this out to figure out if he would stay if Kyrie was gone. And the fact that Durant was largely silent throughout this whole thing, there were a couple reports that he was frustrated that the Nets didn't try hard enough to understand Kyrie, but I don't know what else they could have done, but whatever. Like, other than little snippets like that, Durant could have put public pressure on the Nets if he wanted.
No question. No question.
And he chose not to. So that was likely the biggest leverage that Kyrie had. And if that wasn't really that strong, we'll get into this. The game that he thought he was playing, I don't think was nearly on the terms that he was seeing it.
Yeah, and it was funny. Like Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, Windhorst reported at ESPN. It was made very clear. He was like, "We're not doing this again. Well, I'll trade both of them, but we're not doing this again." Meaning I'll trade Westbrook. I'll trade Kyrie, and he's there. Westbrook. I'll trade Kyrie, and I'll trade Durant if we have to. But we are not going through what we did last year again, and that basically ended the deal with that. So with the following statement, normal people keep the world going, but those who dare to be different lead us into tomorrow. I've made my decision to opt in. See you in the fall. 11. Yeah. Normal people.
Mina Kimes, I thought, had a great line. Normal people keep the world going, but those who dare to be different lead us into tomorrow. Me, about to order 2 appetizers as an entree.
I mean, this is why I have said more than once that I feel like Kyrie Irving would be the most insufferable road trip partner you could possibly find on planet Earth.
Here's the thing. Kyrie Irving, in this whole process, because he was sending out, these cryptic tweets, including the one with Brother Mouzone from The Wire, smiling when all the chaos that he had created and all the sides against the middle had played out, and he had engineered that, and a couple other cryptic social media posts, stuff like that. Kyrie was clearly playing a game of 4-dimensional chess in his mind against nobody. Nobody else was playing the game that Kyrie thought he was playing, and he still lost. He still managed to lose a game of 4-dimensional chess that nobody else was playing, right down to the fact that this guy who just propped himself up as, different, the guy leading the world is different, he did the most conventional thing you possibly could do, other than not act like an asshat in the process of eventually opting into $37 million. He did the most conventional thing possible.
Yep.
Period.
Yep. I guess he's just not that unconventional. The rest of us. Anyway, the other half of this, though, is Russell Westbrook. And there was a lot of chatter on Twitter as to how the Lakers were handling this and whether or not they were being too sensitive to Westbrook. Some interesting developments out of that, which we'll get to. And again, Malik Monk's comments about free agency. That's all next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you would need in a traditional chain storefront. If they say they have them all, they are lying to you. And don't go there anyway, because why would you spend 30, 50%, 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway, getting played by some shady salesperson talking down to you like a complete sucker? Because you can get it for far less at rockauto.com. For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 from a chain store. It's only $216 at Rock Auto. They are a family business, rockauto.com. They have been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. And whether it's for a classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Convenience, people. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
So it was interesting. I mean, obviously, everyone knows, Andy, what's going on here with the Lakers and Westbrook. The Lakers would the Lakers would like to move on from Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook, by all appearances, would like to be moved on from. So the idea that the Lakers would be, looking into a Kyrie deal or something like that shouldn't shock anybody. It certainly shouldn't shock Westbrook. But I have to say, I think the Lakers handled this extremely well. The leaks and the reporting, to me, felt pretty clearly like it was coming from LeBron's side. It was coming from Kyrie. It was coming from the Nets. But you didn't see a lot of stuff that really looked like it was coming out of El Segundo.
Other than maybe details about they'd have to give up Russ, but we knew that anyway.
Right, but we did, but they were like,
or that they were interested at all. I mean, that's
right.
basically it.
And so I think there are some fans who are upset by the, why are we so concerned about Russ's feelings and this and that and the other. I feel like everybody needs to pause and understand what's going on here. The Lakers did the right thing by looking, and will continue to look for trades around Westbrook, but they don't have to drag the guy in the process. You can try to trade him while you're saying all the nice things that they've said about him all this offseason, so that if he is in training camp in October, everybody can pretend like this relationship has a chance to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a matter of trying to massage Russ's feelings, I mean, it is important. I was thinking about this actually. Get to a different thought before I address my original one.
Sure.
When you had mentioned, and I've said this before too, many times, that the Lakers would like to move Russ, but also Russ would likely prefer to be traded. That may still be true, but there is actually a chance that with a new coach that seemingly he has been talking with and maybe has, in his mind, if nothing else, a better foundation than he had with Frank Vogel, there is always a chance that Russ wants to be here now more than he did 2 months ago.
Sure, that's possible.
But it's just sort of dawned on me, because we've been talking about this a lot, and I don't think incorrectly, that Russ would just as much like to be moved as the Lakers would like to move him. There is a chance that's not the case as much anymore. And if nothing else, I think just that possibility should be acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. But it is important, because while that doesn't guarantee, if it's true, if he's 15% happier, 20% happier, 30%, it doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean that he quickly won't devolve, but it means it's more likely. And if he's on the team, things that make Westbrook play better, things that make him more productive, are better for the Lakers. And I feel like people are just still so angry and upset about how last year went, and upset at the front office, upset at Westbrook, upset at everybody, that they're kind of willing to cut off their nose to spite their face in this situation going forward. It doesn't make sense to me.
No, you want to try to salvage this if it's going to be Russ on the team. And you and I have thought since the offseason began, slow down to everybody that keeps saying there's absolutely no way you can bring Russ back. There's no way the Lakers would ever bring him back. We've said, no, actually, there is a pretty good chance they're going to bring him back, because the market for him is going to be borderline non-existent. And, unless the Lakers are willing to just throw in every single asset that they have to move a guy on a 1-year deal, which would be really stupid and short-sighted, there's a really good chance that he may end up on the team next year. Now, he obviously could end up getting traded, and things may get a little bit more heated and active once he presumably opts into that $47 million. But if he's going to be on the team, you need to try in earnest to make this work. So if you reach a point where it doesn't work, and say you have to pay the guy to stay home, or if you're trying to do things like get him to play off the bench, like Laker fans have been begging to see happen if he's going to be on this team, that's going to be a tough sell for Russ anyway. You don't want to make it a tougher sell by looking like you're disrespecting him in this process. I don't think Russ would feel disrespected by the idea of the Lakers having talks about possibly acquiring Kyrie Irving. We're like, Russ, as much as Russ is temperamental, and I think makes everything personal, like that's what motivates him, I think he can understand this and rationalize it. He's been
he's been traded many times before.
Right. He's been traded for high-end players like Kyrie Irving. But what you don't want to do is just, as you had said before, drag Russ in the process. And I think the Lakers have been handling this really well, because whether you like it or not, there is politicking in all of this.
I find the whole thing fascinating because it really is, to some degree, a referendum on whether or not the Lakers are shifting their mindset in how they construct rosters, and what they're willing to do, and what they're willing to do to win the summer, and what they're willing to do to win the press conference. And teams make mistakes. They make really bad mistakes, like trading for Russell Westbrook. Do they learn by taking the medicine, or do they not and try to do cosmetic things to show that they are going to busily try to fix this problem no matter what? And at least for the time being, it seems like they're going to be patient. Free agency, Andy, starts on Thursday evening, 3:00 local time if you are out on the West Coast. Malik Monk made some headlines today in a story from Jovan Buha at The Athletic, talking about whether or not he'd be willing to take less money to play with the Lakers again next season. We'll talk about it.
And Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports development, league reviews, and news, including baseball, boxing, MMA, tennis, NFL futures, NBA futures, and a whole lot more. You can actually bet on, speaking of the NBA in the future, NBA 2K23, the cover athlete currently. Ja Morant is the clubhouse leader. Also among the high bets are Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Steph Curry. You can even get Trae Young at 33-1, Devin Booker at 33-1, and LaMelo Ball 28-1. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So mentioned the story about Malik Monk that's up on The Athletic right now from Jovan Buha. Jovan's actually going to join us for Wednesday's show. Talking about that, he wrote a story about the Arkansas connection between Monk and Austin Reeves. And so, lots of stuff going on there. Very excited to have Jovan on. He'll have some thoughts about the Kyrie Irving situation, what's going on with Russ, free agency kicking off on Thursday. Always a great guest. We're very excited to have him
Plus
back.
His sweet hair.
Oh, just stare right at it the whole time.
Yeah.
I don't even pay attention to what's coming out of his mouth, the words.
God, Brian, this used to be me, man.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at this. I once had that hair in my 20s. Look at that. I look like a damn rock star.
And this is Andy today.
I know.
This is him today before he does his makeup before the show.
I know.
I mean, it takes all that time in the chair to get it to look like what you're seeing here on the left side of your screen. But when he wakes up in the morning, that's him.
Mm-hmm. It takes a village,
guy
Brian.
From Squid Game. That's right. It's lucky those doer people are on board. That infrastructure is not free.
No, it is not.
So, one of the interesting things, though, that Jovan reports in this story is that Monk is willing to perhaps stay for less. It is generally perceived the Lakers can't afford him. The most amount of money they could give Malik Monk this offseason is their taxpayer mid-level, a little above $6 million. And given
for the time being, unless they stretched Russ,
right,
or moved him, something like that,
without doing something drastic. And if they did that, they could give him the full taxpayer mid-level, which would be about $10 million. It is, I think, fair to say that Monk on the open market, even in a tight year, which this is shaping up to be, not a lot of teams with cap space, is going to be able to make more than $6 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's still nonetheless interesting to hear him talk about the possibilities of being able to stay here for less, I thought.
Yeah. He told Jovan, quote, "Money is always a part, man, but I don't think it's the biggest priority in my free agency this year. It's me feeling like I'm having a home and I can go out there and do the same things I did this year." He told Jovan that he would consider accepting less money than the market price. And he said, they may not be able to pay me as much as I want, but I could be here and be way more comfortable as a Laker than going to any other team that would pay me $5 million more. So it's just me trying to figure out what that team would really want to be. It's interesting, too, that Jovan also pointed out in this piece that Monk is prioritizing, trying to win a title going into the playoffs. Malik Monk has actually never been in the playoffs before. So that is something that he would want to experience. And
now, does that mean he's going to leave, or does that mean he's going to stay?
It just means that if there is, I think it means if there's a team that can pay him $10 million, is a playoff given and seems very, very comfortable, there's a good chance he could end up with that team. But to go on record with this, though, is not insignificant, because that's going out on a limb.
It is, and I do think it recognizes, I think, his appreciation. The Lakers, kind of, as it turns out, we're one of the only teams that were itching to get him into their organization last year, and all that stuff. I think it's also a recognition that the market may not play out the way that some guys are hoping. There will be people who are unable to get the level of money that they think they want, that in another year they think they might be able to get. So there is, I think, some setting of expectations there too, so that the Lakers don't just automatically exclude him from what they might be doing. The more interesting question to me is whether it's 6 million, whether it's, the stretch thing with Russ, and suddenly you have 10 million, whatever it might be, whether or not Monk would even be the best use of that money, because the Lakers only have one way to sign a guy for more than a veteran's minimum, and that is with that exception. You can split it up, you can chop it into different pieces, you can do whatever, but that's the only way that they have to do it. If you use it all on Malik Monk, is that the best use of that money?
Yeah, it's a really, really fascinating question, Brian, because Malik Monk is, in a vacuum, incredible value at that price. Like, it would be very difficult to find a better player than him at that price point, and
especially that 6 million figure.
Right. And he does fit really well alongside LeBron and AD. He can space the floor for them. He can run the floor for them. He can do a little bit of secondary, or as I like to say, thirdendary playmaking. And he can even be like a safety valve when those guys can't get a good look. Like, he can be a little wild at times, but he is better in terms of being somebody who helps run sets or just keep sets on the rails than I thought he would be. Mm-hmm. But like, this team is already super guard heavy as it is, and they need,
despite having like 7 players,
right? It's very guard heavy, or guys who are 2-3s if you're really looking to stretch it, like really mm-hmm. looking to push the definitions. And in particular, they need not just more help along the wings, but wings that can defend, which Monk can. I mean, to his credit, he worked at it this year.
He tried.
Yes, it is not, like, by Monk's own admission in the past, disinterest. This was effort, but just he's a slight dude.
And he's not a good defender. Certain guys are not great at it, no matter how hard they try.
No.
But it's just my thing about it is, like, by definition, re-signing Malik Monk doesn't make you better. It makes you the same. And they may end up in a place where the same is the best use of that money, because if you sign the wrong guy, you could get worse. Like, misallocating that money could make you worse, but you can't get better by signing the same guys. So if you have an opportunity to go get one of those defensive minded wings, if you could get Otto Porter, for example, with all the injury risks and whatever, for that 6 million, that to me would be a much better use of that money than bringing back Monk, despite the fact that I think everybody inside the building rightly loves the guy.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, we never met him in person just because of all the COVID restrictions and stuff like that. But he seemed like he was a great dude, had a really great vibe. Like, Malik Monk's season was one of the very, very few bright spots in an absolutely abysmal season.
I would agree.
But what makes this even more complex, Brian, though, in terms of trying to figure out the best use of that money, is whether or not you'd have better options. And I went to a list at ESPN that Bobby Marks, one of their writers who was a former GM for the Nets, he had a list of guys that he thought would be either taxpayer mid-level guys or somewhere below, like basically between veterans minimum and taxpayer mid-level guys. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to name you the names in terms of the people that I thought maybe could be more useful than Malik Monk. You can give me your opinion, and then from there, I'm going to run through all the names that I didn't think would be, at that price. And you can tell me the guys that I thought could be Caleb Martin on the Heat.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a little undersized as a wing.
But very versatile player. Can actually score a little bit.
And he's a much better defender than Malik Monk.
Yeah, good player.
Derek Jones Jr.
No.
He's a better defender. He's not a great scorer. Jeremy Lamb. Probably a wash.
It's a wash. I don't trust him.
DeLon Wright. He's interesting because he'd be the only proven defensive guard that the Lakers would have. He's a good defender, and he's a good defender, point guard.
Yeah, solid backup point guard. Could function as a starting point guard maybe on this team. I think he's up around 40% from 3-point range. He's a little older than I think people think.
He's about 30.
He's 30 at this point.
Yeah.
So there's not any upside there, but he's solid. I think that probably makes him probably be a little bit better.
Right, but it's not demonstratively.
No.
Otto Porter Jr., we had mentioned, yes. Wes Matthews, who maybe wouldn't require the full level anyway.
If you are paying more than $1 million plus or whatever it is for Wes, you're doing it wrong.
Okay, from here, I'm going to name all the rest of the names, regardless of position. You stop me.
And some of these are more 2-3s than 3-4s, and a 3-4 is really what I would prefer.
Sure, I'm just going through everybody.
Sure, I understand.
And you stop me if you hear somebody that you think should be in the bracket that we just discussed. Bryn Forbes, Dennis Schroeder, Goran Dragic, Lou Williams, Cody Martin, Josh Okogie.
Now let me stop you there for a second. It's possible I'm combining Cody and the other one,
Caleb.
Caleb
is the better fit
together. I'm just saying it is possible I am combining some of their skills, but keep going.
Hamidou Diallo, Ben McLemore, Torian.
Diallo actually just not. I would like Diallo.
Oh, did he opt in?
He opted in, so that's not even an option anymore.
My apologies too if any of these have been updated before I knew. Mello, Trey Lyles, Amir Coffey, Troy Brown Jr., O'Shea Brissett. I don't even know who that is. Tristan Thompson.
He's actually not a bad player. He plays for Indiana, but I would actually consider Brissett. I don't know a ton about him, but I would consider that.
Dwayne Dedman, Serge Ibaka, Naz Reid would be great, but I can't imagine that with a team option, Minnesota won't pick that up. Mike Muscala, that's a team option anyway. JaVale McGee, Bismack Biyombo, Gorgui Dieng.
Right. Boogie. Now, by the way, we are well past wings. We're just talking about everybody.
I'm just talking about everybody, period.
Yeah.
Biyombo, Gorgui Dieng, Boogie, Thomas Bryant, Robin Lopez.
Yeah. So the moral of the story here is that there might be some decent 1-year options.
See what I'm getting at, Brian?
Right. And so it's a conundrum for the Lakers because the position that they need might not offer the players that they want. A guy like Bruce Brown would be a great signing. He's going to cost more money than they're going to be able to afford it.
Yep.
Monk might be the best player to serve available, but he serves the smallest need versus finding the player of greatest need and spending more, from a value standpoint. I still it's pickle.
Yeah,
it's pickle. So, all right. Maybe this is something we could talk about with Jovan on Wednesday's show. Jovan Buha, again from The Athletic, is going to be joining us. Always love when he is on. We'll talk a little bit more about Monk, what he thinks might happen there, where he thinks the Lakers might spend their money as we kick off free agency at the end of the week. Reminder, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a few hours before the audio product. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day, and we'll see everybody on Wednesday.